Hey, what's up, everyone? Hope you're doing good. So first, let's set the scene. Earlier in January, Microsoft released a regular security update for Windows 11, and on the surface, it looked normal. Security patches, vulnerability fixes, the usual stuff we see every month. But very quickly after that update rolled out, reports started coming in from users and IT admins saying something was seriously wrong. Remote desktop connections were failing. People were entering correct credentials, everything looked fine, but the sign-in process just wouldn't complete. In some cases, it would loop. In others, it would throw vague authentication errors. And for home users, that might sound annoying, but for businesses, system administrators, and anyone managing machines remotely, this was a big problem. Remote desktop isn't some niche feature. It's a core part of how people work remotely, manage servers, access work PCs from home, or even help family members troubleshoot their systems. When that breaks, productivity doesn't just slow down, it can stop completely. And what made it worse was that rolling back the January security update wasn't always straightforward, especially on managed systems where updates are enforced. That's where KB5077744 comes in. This update is what Microsoft calls an out-of-band update. That basically means it didn't wait for the usual schedule. They identified a regression, confirmed it was widespread enough, and decided it needed an immediate fix. That alone tells you how serious the issue was. Microsoft doesn't push out-of-band updates unless something breaks and it can't wait. Now, what KB5077744 actually does at its core is fix the remote desktop authentication failure introduced by the previous update. The issue was tied to how credentials were being validated during the remote desktop sign-in process. The security update tightened some authentication behavior, which is usually a good thing. But in this case, it caused a compatibility problem that blocked legitimate logins. This new update corrects that behavior while keeping the underlying security improvements intact. That's important because it means Microsoft didn't just roll things back. They adjusted the logic so systems stay protected while also functioning correctly. Another important detail here is that this update includes both the servicing stack update and the cumulative update in one package. The servicing stack is basically the part of Windows that installs updates. When Microsoft bundles it like this, it's usually because the fix depends on changes at that level. The downside is that servicing stack updates can't be uninstalled separately. So once this update is on your system, parts of it are permanent. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's something people should understand, especially those who like to test updates cautiously. There is also a known issue documented with this update, and this one is a little strange. On some systems, particularly enterprise-managed devices, the password sign-in option icon may appear missing or invisible on the lock screen. The option itself still exists, but the visual indicator doesn't show properly. That can definitely confuse users, especially in environments where people are already frustrated because of recent remote desktop problems. Microsoft acknowledged this issue and provided a known issue rollback for managed devices, which allows IT admins to revert that specific behavior using group policy. For regular home users, this issue appears to be limited and not widespread, but it's still worth mentioning because it shows how complex these updates have become. Performance-wise, KB5077744 doesn't introduce any noticeable slowdowns or speed boosts. It's not one of those updates that changes animations, UI behavior, or system responsiveness in a way most users will feel. Its focus is stability and reliability. And honestly, that's exactly what you want from an emergency update like this. The goal here is to restore trust in the system after something critical broke. Security-wise, this update includes the same January security fixes from the earlier release. So if you skip that update because of the remote desktop issues, installing this one brings you fully up to date from a security standpoint. That includes fixes for vulnerabilities that could potentially allow elevation of privilege, information disclosure, or remote code execution. Microsoft doesn't always go into extreme detail publicly for obvious reasons, but the important thing is that you're not missing out on protection by installing this fix. Installation itself is pretty straightforward. For most users, Windows Update will handle it automatically. If your system checks for updates, it should either already have this installed or be offering it. For IT admins and advanced users, the update is also available through the Microsoft Update Catalog for manual deployment. This is especially useful in environments where updates are staged, tested, and rolled out in phases. Just remember, because this update includes the servicing stack, uninstalling it later isn't as simple as clicking a button. You really want to be confident before deploying it widely, even though it's generally safe and recommended if you were affected by the remote desktop issue. One thing that's worth pointing out is how this situation highlights a bigger pattern we've been seeing with Windows updates. Windows is now a constantly evolving service, not a static product. Every security improvement can potentially affect compatibility, especially with older workflows or enterprise setups. Microsoft is clearly trying to balance security and usability, but sometimes that balance tips a little too far in one direction before corrections like this are made. KB5077744 is essentially a course correction. If you're someone who never uses remote desktop, you might be wondering why this matters to you at all. The answer is that even if you weren't personally affected, this update stabilizes a core Windows component that other features rely on indirectly. Authentication, credential handling, and remote access aren't isolated systems. They're interconnected with how Windows manages user sessions overall. Fixing issues at that level helps prevent other subtle bugs from appearing later. Another subtle but important aspect of this update is confidence. When a major feature breaks and stays broken, users lose trust in updates. By responding quickly with an out-of-band fix, Microsoft is signaling that they're monitoring feedback closely and are willing to act fast when something goes wrong. That doesn't excuse the original regression, but it does matter in the long run. It's also worth mentioning compatibility with different system types. This update applies to both x64 and ARM-based systems. With more Windows devices moving to ARM, especially laptops, it's good to see fixes rolled out universally rather than leaving certain platforms waiting longer. Remote desktop issues on ARM devices were especially painful for some users, and this update addresses that equally. From a practical standpoint, after installing KB5077744, users who were previously locked out of remote desktop sessions should find that sign-ins work normally again. Credentials are accepted, sessions established correctly, and the random failures introduced earlier are gone. That alone makes this update worth installing if you were impacted. Looking at the bigger picture, KB5077744 is one of those updates that won't be flashy, won't change how Windows looks, and won't give you anything exciting to show off, but it plays a crucial role in keeping systems usable. These are the updates that quietly keep everything running, while the more visible features get all the attention. So if you installed the earlier January update and suddenly found yourself unable to connect remotely, this is the fix you were waiting for. And if you delayed updates because you heard something was broken, this update is Microsoft's way of saying it's safe to move forward again. At the end of the day, KB5077744 exists because something important broke and Microsoft needed to make it right quickly. It restores remote desktop functionality, keeps January's security protections intact, and stabilizes a core part of the operating system without introducing major new problems. It's not perfect, and it comes with a small known issue, but in the grand scheme of things, it does exactly what it was meant to do.